Title: The Third Bell. On the outskirts of old Chicago stood a semi-abandoned theater, covered in the dust of time and memories. It was called the Hall of Night, and no locals approached it after sunset. They said the last performance there had ended in tragedy. Since then, the doors remained closed, but sometimes footsteps could still be heard inside. Marcus was a young director who had come from New York, dreaming of reviving forgotten stages. He bought the building for next to nothing and decided his debut production would happen here. He didn't believe in superstitions. Not until the first rehearsal. Everything with the cast went smoothly until one day a strange sound rang through the hall. A bell. None of the crew had touched any bell. Marcus frowned. Someone's just playing a prank, he thought. But the next day, the bell rang again. 3 times. Exactly at 9:17 p.m. One of the actresses, Layla, said she felt like someone was watching her from a stage. Lights flickered in the dressing room. Costumes moved on their own. So Marcus decided to stay overnight to prove to himself it was all in his head. He sat alone in the empty theater. Time dragged on. At 9:17 p.m., the bell rang. Once, twice, 3 times, and the curtains slowly opened. A figure stepped onto the stage, a woman in an old-fashioned gown. Her face was hidden beneath a veil. She spoke. The role always waits for the actress. "You called us Marcus." He froze. Her voice, she knew his name. The woman stepped to the edge of the stage. Her voice echoed. "If the third bell has rung, the show has begun. But you don't walk out, you stay." That night, Marcus disappeared. He was never seen again. But every night in the Hall of Night, exactly at 9:17 p.m., someone hears 3 bells. And if you enter the theater at that moment, the play begins. But you can never leave. The missing pages. A week had passed since Marcus vanished. The city barely noticed. The theater was old, forgotten, and young directors disappear all the time in a city like Chicago. At least that's what the police said. But Layla knew something was wrong. She had been the last person to speak to Marcus. He had called her at 8:42 p.m. the night he disappeared. His voice had been shaking. "Don't come to the theater tonight," he whispered. "Something's not right. I think the play is real." Layla hadn't known what he meant. She thought he was tired, maybe delusional from stress. But now, that call echoed in her mind like a warning. She returned to the theater against her better judgment. The door was locked, but the moment she touched the handle, it creaked open by itself. Inside, it was cold. Much colder than it should have been in mid-July. Dust swirled in the air, but the stage was spotless. The red curtain closed. The spotlight on. Someone had been here. She walked backstage. Everything looked the same, except for one thing. Marcus's notebook lay on the floor, pages torn, scattered. She knelt and picked them up. The first page read, "They are not actors. They are not ghosts. They are echoes. Impressions. They perform because they must. And once you see them, you belong to the play." The handwriting grew frantic, each page worse than the last. One was stained, possibly with blood. On the final page, scrawled in the corner, were 3 words. "The third bell." Suddenly, from deep within the stage, came a sound. Ding. Layla dropped the pages. Ding. The spotlight flickered. Her breath caught. Ding. And the curtain began to open. She ran. She didn't look back. She didn't want to see what stood on that stage. As she burst out into the night, she heard a voice behind her, soft and ancient. "You came back, Layla. Your role isn't over." Back in her apartment, she couldn't sleep. Her dreams were full of velvet curtains and endless applause. Every night at 9:17 p.m., she heard bells, even outside the theater. But the worst came 3 days later when she found a sealed envelope on her kitchen table. No return address. Inside, a theater ticket. The date, July 31st. The time, 9:17 p.m. The seat, front row, center. Below, one line. The final act awaits. The invitation, July 31st, arrived like a slow-moving storm. Layla hadn't slept properly in days. Her eyes were sunken. Her hands trembled, and every clock she looked at seemed to freeze on 9:17, then skip forward a minute as if mocking her. The ticket still sat on her desk. Its paper was thick, old, almost brittle, like it had come from another century. The ink shimmered faintly under the light, and though she had tried to tear it or burn it, the ticket remained whole. Untouched. Untouchable. By 8:30 p.m., her instinct screamed for her to leave the city. Drive. Fly. Run. But something deeper, something darker, pulled her toward the theater, as if the ticket had hooked her soul. At 8:56, she stood in front of the Hall of Night. It looked even older than before. The bricks seemed to sag. Vines curled unnaturally along the doorway. And above the grand wooden entrance, a new sign glowed faintly. Tonight only, the final act. Inside, the air was thick with perfume and rot. Dust floated like ash in dim candlelight. But what stunned her most was the audience. Every seat was full. Hundreds of silent faces stared at the empty stage, all dressed in elegant old-fashioned clothing, gowns, tuxedos, feathers, and pearls. But no one blinked. No one moved. They didn't even seem to breathe. Layla felt herself shaking as she stepped toward her assigned seat, front row, center. As she lowered herself into the velvet cushion, a whisper reached her ear, not from beside her, but from inside her own me. ND. You've returned. The curtain will rise. E. At exactly 9:17 p.m., the bells rang. Ding, ding, ding. The curtain slowly parted. The stage was dark, empty, until the spotlight clicked on. And standing in the center was Marcus. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with black. His smile was fixed but wrong. Too wide, too forced. He began to speak, but no sound came from his mouth. Instead, the walls of the theater vibrated with his words, as if the building itself were speaking for him. Welcome to the final performance. All stories must end. Even yo, URS. Layla tried to scream, but her voice had vanished. Marcus extended a hand toward her. The stage stretched, moved, pulling her chair forward until she hovered on the edge of the boards. Her feet dangled. The audience behind her still hadn't blinked. Suddenly, a new voice broke the silence. Soft, clear, and terrified. You don't belong here. A figure stood at the far end of the stage. A teenage girl, maybe 17. Pale skin, torn jeans, wide eyes. She clutched a script in her trembling hands. You're not part of the play yet, but you will be if you don't leave. They'll trap you, like they ped me. The stage lights flickered violently. Marcus turned toward the girl, his smile vanishing. He raised a hand, and the air around her rippled. Layla's instincts kicked in. She jumped to her feet and grabbed the script from the girl's hands. The pages were blank, except TH. The last one. Only silence ends the show. Only light breaks TH. Curtain. Without knowing why, Layla turned to the audience and screamed. Wake up! The lights exploded. The audience vanished. The theater crumbled into darkness. And Layla opened her eyes. She was in her apartment. But the ticket still sat on the table. Fresh. Clean. Waiting. Would you like to continue to? Things are about to get me the author's shadow. Layla stared at the ticket on her table, as if it were a venomous snake. How had she escaped? Had it even happened? The city outside was normal. Her phone worked. The morning sun filtered through the blinds like any other day. But something inside her was off. The world felt thinner, like a stage set waiting to be pulled apart. She picked up the ticket again. It was identical. Same ornate lettering. Same gold-inked time stamp. 9:17 p.m. But now, something was different. On the back, in a handwriting that looked like hers, was a single line. Finish what you started. Layla felt the room grow cold. She hadn't written that. At least, she didn't remember writing it. Later that afternoon, needing answers, she went to the library and pulled every record she could find on the Hall of Night. Most articles were vague, full of rumors, disappearances, cursed performances, and one particularly disturbing event in 1907, when a playwright named Eleanor Dray had vanished the night her final play was set to premiere. The title of that play? The Third Bell. Layla's stomach turned. She flipped through the microfilm copy of Eleanor Dray's notes, which had been archived after her disappearance. The language was flowery, dramatic, but certain phrases leapt off the page. One she had seen in Marcus's notebook, even in her dreams. And then, on the final page of Eleanor's script, she found a name scribbled into the margin. L. Raythorn. Layla's full name, Layla Raythorn. She dropped the film reel and backed away from the machine. How could her name be in a script written over? A century ago, shaking, she went home and dug through her old journals. There, she found something she didn't remember ever writing. Pages filled with dialogue, stage directions, eerie monologues. Words she'd thought she'd only heard inside the theater. The characters, the bells, Marcus. It was all there. And at the top of one page, in her, in scrawl read, The Third Bell, a one-act tragedy in th, re-movements. Her hands went numb. Had she been writing this her whole life? That night, the power in her apartment cut out at 9:16 p.m. She froze, heart pounding. In the darkness, the first bell rang. Ding. Then the second. Ding. Layla ran to the door locked. Windows nailed shut. Her breath fogged in the freezing air. The third bell rang. Ding. This time, there was no curtain. Her walls peeled away like paper. Her ceiling stretched upward into the abyss. And suddenly, she stood, not in her apartment, but on the stage of the Hall of Night. Alone, except for the audience. Hundreds of faces again. Lifeless, waiting, watching. A spotlight snapped on above her. The girl from before, the one who warned her, stepped out of the shadows behind the CU. Bertai. In, she whispered. You wrote the story. Now you have to finish it. Oh, alright, we'll finish you. Layla stared at the glowing script in her hands and realized it was writing itself, the quill beneath the stage. The words on the glowing script crawled like living ink, reshaping them. Elves. As Layla read them, Act V, the author returns. She stands before them, no longer audience, no longer actress. She is the playwright, and the play will end only when her truth is told, or when. The CU. Retain consumes her. Layla's fingers trembled. The paper was hot, humming with energy, as if the story wasn't just unfolding, but feeding on her. The theater moaned. Above her, the rafters groaned like old bones. The velvet curtain behind her twitched as if it were breathing. And the faces in the audience, all now turned in unison, seemed closer than before. The girl, still unnamed, stepped into the spotlight, holding something in her outstretched hands. A quill, black, wet, glistening. It wasn't a pen, it was a feather. Large, unnatural and warm. You're not just part of the play, the girl whispered. You're the only one who can end it. Every page that was ever written air came from that. Layla took the quill slowly. As her fingers closed around it, memories she never lived surged through her mind. A woman in 1907 screaming as the curtain fell. A playwright burned alive in her dressing room in 1929. A child trapped in a prop chest for 70 years. Marcus, writing feverishly in a forgotten office, blood leaking from his nose. And herself, again and again, standing on this very stage, every time with different clothes, a different age, but always the same ending. The third bell. She dropped the quill. No, she said aloud. This isn't mine. I didn't write this. The theater responded, groaning in fury. The floor cracked beneath her. Black mist rose through the gaps. The front row of the audience opened their mouths, not to speak, but to sing. A chorus of dead voices humming a broken lullaby. The girl cried out, if you don't end it, it will start again. And next time, you won't come back. Layla, desperate, grabbed the quill once more and screamed. Then tell me how. What do I write? The girl stepped. D forward, whispering in her ear. Write your name. Your R. Ill name. T. He won the play stole. Layla stared at the script. Her hand shook. Then, slowly, she began to write across the glowing page. Layla. Raythorne. The moment the last letter touched paper, the stage exploded in white light. The audience burst into ash, disintegrating like dust caught in wind. The theater cracked, then crumbled around her in silence. She fell backward into nothingness, script still in hand. When Layla opened her eyes again, she was lying in a hospital bed. Bright lights, machines, A nurse reading a chart. Miss Raythorn, the nurse said gently. You're awake. You've been unconscious for 4 days. They found you collapsed inside the old hall of night theater. It burned down the night you went in. Layla's lips parted. She tried to speak. Boo. Only one word came out. Script. The nurse nodded. Funny you say that. Fireman said you were holding a piece of paper. Blank. Completely blank. The nurse placed it beside her on the tray. Layla looked. The page was empty, except at the bottom corner, in faint foddy. In ink was one final line. The curtain may CLO. SE. But the story watches. The other tickets. Layla was discharged from the hospital 2 days later. The doctor said she had no burns, no signs of smoke inhalation, and no neurological damage. Yet she had been found inside a structure that no longer existed. The Hall of Night had burned down completely. Fire investigators said the interior had been gutted by the blaze. No one should have survived, but Layla had. And now, her world was starting to bend. Back home, she locked away the blank page the firefighters had found. But even behind glass, it glowed faintly at night. That week, Layla avoided crowds, ignored ringing phones, and unplugged every clock in her apartment. But at 9:17 p.m. each night, she still felt something brush past her shoulders like a curtain swaying. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, everything changed again. She was standing in line at the grocery store when a man behind her dropped something. Layla turned to help him and froze. It was a ticket. Not to a concert, not to a movie, to a theater. A black ticket with gold lettering identical to hers. The man looked at her, confused. Edition, are you Oka? E. She see. Would barely wisp. Where did you get that? He blinked. In the mail yesterday. No return address. Thought it was some kind of immersive theater stunt. Don't go, Layla said, grabbing his arm. Whatever you do, don't show up. He chuckled nervously. Okay. But Layla's heart was already racing. She stepped out of line, left her basket, and walked the aisles, looking at people's bags, pockets, purses. And suddenly, she saw them everywhere. 3 others. Then 5. Then 10. Tickets. Black. Gold. Real. Some tucked in wallets. Some sticking out of coats. One. Held in a child's hand. Being used as a bookmark. They were being invited. That night, Layla sat in the dark, turning the blank page over and over in her hands. She could almost hear the bells again, but this time, they sounded distant, like they were ringing for someone else. But who? And why now? That's when the doorbell rang. Layla froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. She stood slowly, every hair on her neck rising, and looked through the peephole. There was no one there. Only a folded sheet of paper on the welcome mat. She picked it up. It was a program for a play. The Third Bell, Traveling Stage. Next performance, August 9th, 9:17 p.m. Location, private. Invitation only. Director, Layla Raythorn. The Traveling Stage. Layla stared at the program in her hands. Her name printed as the director. I didn't agree to this, she whispered. But the paper didn't care. She tossed it on the table, but when she turned around, it was back in her hand. No matter where she put it, it returned to her fingers like a magnet. The next morning, her phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number. It's spreading. Birbe. Gathered. Finish tea. You play, or it will write itself. Layla didn't reply. She couldn't. Instead, she returned to the last place she swore she'd never visit again. The ruins of the Hall of Night. The site was fenced off, covered in ash and debris. But as she stood outside the yellow caution tape, she noticed something impossible. A stage light still flickered under the rubble. And in the soot, carved into the concrete, were the words. One last act. One la. SD Bell. One last joy. See. Suddenly, behind her, a voice. You were never the audience, Layla. You were always the author. And the play won't. End until you decide how it ends. She turned and saw Marcus. Alive. Or, at least, his body was alive. His eyes were clouded. His skin pale, stiff. Like a puppet powered. By memory. He held out a new script. You can either close the curtai. N. Or raise it again. B. Either way, they're all watching. Layla took the script, though it burned her fingers. On the cover, the third bell, final draft. And beneath it, one final instruction. 2. Stop the show, one must per. For me ending. On stage. With truth. But Layla didn't know the truth. Not yet. She only knew one thing. The last bell had not yet rung. The final rehearsal. Layla stared at the script in her hands. The third bell, final draft. The pages were crisp, untouched, yet somehow ancient. Each line pulsed beneath her fingers like a heartbeat. The ink shimmered as if it were alive. She sat alone in her apartment, every light on, every mirror covered. She had learned that mirrors reflected things not always in the room. Layla flipped to the first page. Scene 1. The forgotten rehearsal. Characters. The author, the Ek. Oh, the cast of shadows. Locat. Ion, anywhere T. Hey, gather. And beneath it, T. Ruth is not remembered. It is rehearsed. The words chilled her. Then the script began writing itself again, just like before. Only this time, it knew her mind. Every fear, every regret, every lie she'd ever told. Lines began to form across the pages. She told herself she had never written the play. But the ink was hers. She said Marcus vanished. But she left. T.M. She claimed she didn't. T believe in curses. But she started one. Layla dropped the script. It landed face up on the table. Suddenly, she remembered something she had buried. 10 years ago, college. She had written a short one-act for a class. A horror piece about a cursed theater. A forgotten bell. A GI.RL who couldn't leave the stage. She had called it the third bell. Ed, she gasped. I didn't rewrite the play, she whispered. I resurrected it. The curse hadn't found her. She had reawakened it. In horror, Layla turned the page again. The next scene was already written. Scene 2. The traveling stage opens. Time, August 9th, 9:17 p.m. Director, L. Raythorn. Cast, all those who hold a ticket. And then, the bells will toll once. Twice. On the third, the world will choose. That night, Layla drove aimlessly, unsure where to go. But at 9:16 p.m., her car stalled in the middle of an empty lot downtown, where an old train station once stood. The moment the clock turned to 9:17. Ding, ding, ding. She didn't hear it from her car. She heard it inside her head. Lights flared across the cracked pavement. A massive curtain rose from nowhere, glowing red and gold, forming a phantom stage between crumbling columns. And people appeared. Hundreds, holding black tickets. They were being drawn in like moths to a flame. Blank-eyed, shuffling. Some were people she recognized. The man from the grocery store. A woman from her apartment building. One of her former teachers. Even a boy she had known in high school, who'd gone missing at 17. They were all here, and they all looked at her. A spotlight fell on Layla. The script appeared, in her hands again, open to the final page. Scene 3, the curtain's verdict. If she speaks the truth, final, unfiltered, the bells will fade and the watchers will rest. But if she lies or hides or runs, the stage will rise again. Everywhere. Forever. Layla looked up, trembling. T. The audience of the dead. The audience. E of the living. She stepped forward and spoke. I wrote the story. I forgot. I wanted to, but I brought it back. I let it grow. I turned a game into a graveyard. I gave life to shadows because I didn't believe they could touch me. Silence. Then, the entire Phantom Theater began to shake. The red curtain writhed like a storm cloud. The stage cracked. A figure appeared at the center, a twisted Versio. N of herself, made of ink, memory, A. ND. Fear. It stepped forward, its voice, matching hers. Then Finn. Ishit. If. You're ready. Layla raised T. He quill on. He last time. And wrote on the final line. The end. Suddenly, the lights went out. No screams. No applause. Only stillness. And a soft breeze. She woke up alone again. This time not in a hospital, but on the same cracked lot, now empty. No curtain. No stage. Just a night sky above her. In her hands, no script. Just a black feather and a blank page. But the bells had finally stopped. The last audience. Weeks had passed. Chicago had moved on. The burnt ruins of the Hall of Night were finally cleared. Newspapers called it an electrical tragedy and praised the miracle of Layla Raythorn's survival. No one mentioned the black tickets. No one spoke of the red curtain or the glowing stage that rose from thin air. Only Layla remembered. She moved to a smaller apartment across the city. Different neighborhood, different skyline. She canceled all her classes, quit her part-time job at the university, and disconnected every clock in the apartment. But every night at 9:17, she still held her breath. The bells never came. Not out loud, anyway. Instead, the silence echoed. One afternoon, she walked past a bookstore she had never noticed before. Its windows were lined with old scripts, dusty film reels, and ancient typewriters. On impulse, she stepped inside. An elderly man behind the counter looked up and said softly, "You finally closed it." Layla stopped cold. "What?" "The play," he said. "Most don't get that far. Fewer survive the ending." She took a step closer. "Who are you?" "I'm just the understudy," he said with a small smile. "The last to hold the quill before you. But I only managed the second bell." Layla's blood ran cold. He reached below the counter and placed a weathered book in front of her. He was bound in black leather, embossed in fading gold. The third bell, full production archive. She opened it slowly. Page after page, detailed performance. Seguing back over la centurie. Acto. RS. Dyer. Tours. Victims. Survivors. Each pag. He ended the same way. Show closed. Curtain not sealed. Until hers. Layla Raythorn. Final performance. August 9th. Result. Curtain sealed for now. She whispered, "For now?" The old man nodded. The third bell is more than a play. It's a pattern. A curse, yes, but also a mirror. You close the show. But people always need a story. Layla looked up. What happens if someone opened? It again. Azitat. Edition. Then pulled out a single envelope. Black. Gold trimmed. Sealed with red wax. To the next director. Layla stepped back. "No, I burned the script. I ended the show." "You ended your version," he said gently. "But the world is full of storytellers. Someone will always try to rewrite what should stay buried." Her hands began to shake. He placed the envelope in her coat pocket anyway. "You'll know if it's starting again. You'll feel it, like a whisper behind the curtain. Just remember, not every bell tolls for you, but some do." That night, back at her apartment, she sat at her desk with a cup of tea and stared at the blank page she still kept in her drawer. The black feather lay beside it. No glow, no ink, just silence. But then, a soft tap came at her window. She turned. No one was there, just a shadow. Familiar. She stepped toward it, breath caught in her throat. Pressed against the glass, barely 6. Cybele in the city. Light was the faintest outline. Eva stage Curta. In. And then, in her mind, came a whisper. One more draft. The playwright in Portland. 3 months after the last bell faded in Chicago, Elliot Crane, a 22-year-old playwright living in Portal, and Oregon, stumbled upon a curious envelope in his university, Ty's mailroom. It was addressed in flowing script. Elliot Crane, Department of Theater Arts. For your next work. He thought it was a submission or a prank. Boo. T inside was a script on, D-bound with black thread. Title page. The Third B. LL. Original manuscript. Author unknown. Edited by L. Raythorn. Elliot didn't know any L. Raythorn. But the moment he touched the pages, a tingling crept up his arm. His roommates noticed that night that he didn't eat dinner. He locked himself in his room, reading. Page A. After page. Scene after SC. NE. By midnight, he was mutt. Tearing lines under his brie. ADH. By morning, he had made a decision. I'm going to direct it. Casting shadows. Elliot posted casting calls around campus. The Third Bell, one-act mystery. Most people thought it was just student theater. But those who auditioned felt something off. The stage lights flickered. Cold drafts passed through closed doors. One actress fainted after reading a monologue aloud. Elliot didn't blink. He didn't smile anymore either. One night, during rehearsals, a girl named Clara, a freshman cast as the Echo, confided in another actor, saying, "I had a dream where the audience didn't have faces, just empty skin. And when I stopped speaking, they screamed." Elliot overheard. He only said, "That means you're understanding the role." Layla watches. Back in Chicago, Layla felt the shift. She hadn't touched the feather in weeks, hadn't dreamed of curtains. But suddenly, her mirror began fogging at exactly 9:17 p.m. each night. One morning, an email appeared in her spam folder from unknown.cinder@finalact.net. Subject: Your work is resurrected. Opening night, November 13th, Portland, Oregon. Layla gasped. She had never shared the script, never emailed a single page. Yet someone had it, and was using it. The dress rehearsal. Elliot stood center stage as the final rehearsal began. Clara stumbled over a line, and the script in Elliot's hands rewrote itself. She blinked, then recited the correct line perfectly, though no one had corrected her. The assistant director whispered, "Did she just read your mind?" "No," Elliot replied. "The script is guiding her. It knows the right version now." Later, backstage, a crew member screamed when he found rows of chairs bolted to the wall with nameplates on them. Every name was one of the cast members. But when he returned with others to show them, the chairs were gone. The black feather arrives. Layla boarded a flight to Portland. On the plane, she opened her carry-on and found something impossible: the black feather. She hadn't packed it, hadn't even seen it in weeks. But now it lay across her sweater, vibrating with faint heat, as if sensing the dist. It's between her and the new stag. He growing smaller. She lose the bag slowly and whispered to herself, "It's happening again." The forgotten line. During a tech run, Clara froze on stage. Not from nerves, but from something else. She looked out at the empty seats and whispered, "They're already sitting there." The stage lights exploded above her. Sparks rained down, but she didn't flinch. She just turned to Elliot and said, "I don't want to say that line again. The one about the B. L. Every time I say it, my body goes cold inside." Elliot just smiled. "Then say it louder." The program. Layla arrived at the theater 2 days before opening night. She didn't give her real name. She sat in the back row and watched as the crew ran a full dress. And when the house manager placed the printed programs on each seat, Layla picked one up and nearly dropped. "D it." Inside, beneath the cast list, was a sentence she had never written. "The third bell is M.O. Read in a play. It is a mirror, and every audience reflects a new ending." She felt the feather in her coat vibrate. The bells return. November 13th, opening night. At exactly 9:17 p.m., the crowd hushed. Elliot stood in the wings, wearing all black, script clutched tight. His face blank. The lights dimmed. Ding, ding, ding. On the third bell, the curtain rose. But it wasn't the cast who stepped forward first. It was a figure from the shadows, a woman. Layla. She walked slowly onto the stage. Clara gasped. "She's not part of the show." Elliot hissed, "Yes, she is now." The reversal. Layla didn't say a word. She walked to center stage, holding the feather in one hand and the Portland script in the other. She tore the script in half. The light shattered. Every spotlight went dark. Gasps filled the room. Some people tried to leave. The doors w-ed open. From the ceiling, a velvet curtain fell, not down, but across, wrapping the audience. C in soft, choking SI. Lens. Layla SC. Reamed. "This play ends here. With me." But then a new voice rose from Elliot. "No, Layla. You're not the author anymore. I am." The battle of scripts. Elliot pulled out a second script, black leather, dripping with ink. The lights flickered. 2 versions of the play now existed on the same stage. One trying to end the story. One trying to rewrite it. The audience was no longer watching. They were rising, silent, pale, familiar. Layla recognized some of them. Old actors, old watchers, old victims. Elliot raised the black script and screamed, "Begin the final A. CT." A line never written. In the center of the chaos, Layla saw Clara frozen, tears in her eyes. She ran to her, took her H. And D whispered, "You don't have to say your line. Say summit. Hing, N-E. W. Something true." Clara turned slowly, faced the audience. "Fuck, Ed Elliot," and said, "I'm not your echo. I'm not your page. I am not your ending." The black script in Elliot's hands burst into flames. The feather in Layla's pocket disintegrated into light, and the final bell rang, once softly, then all was silent. The ashes of the script. After the final bell, the world seemed to freeze. When the lights returned, the stage was empty. No audience, no props, just Clara standing beside Layla, breathless, shaking, but alive. Elliot was gone, not dead, not injured, simply vanished, as if the script had swallowed its own author. Emergency crews found the theater in disarray. Burn marks on the floor, torn curtains, equipment shorted out. But there were no bodies, no reports of trauma, no visible damage beyond normal fire code violations. Yet, every person in the audience remembered something different. Some swore the show never happened. Others said it was the most immersive performa NC they'd ever seen. Only Layla and Clara knew the truth. "We didn't just stop a play," Layla whispered as they stood outside in the cold. "We ended a cycle, or so they thought." Letters from the dead. 3 days later, Clara received a handwritten letter in her dorm mailbox. No stamp, just her name, in red ink. Inside was a folded sheet of aged parchment. At the top, scrawl, Ed and Fad, ING handwriting. "You broke your lines. Yo, you are no longer Echo." And beneath, IT. "But others are still rehearsing. The Y will write again. They will he. AR the bell." The final sentence chilled her to her core. "Tell the author we're not done." A missing name. Layla contacted archivists at the Library of Congress, desperate to find the origin of the play. Not her draft, but the first one. The cursed script that had haunted the stage since the early 1900s. After weeks of research, a single name emerged: M. Forgotten Records. Eleanor M. Raythorn. Raythorn? Clara asked, stunned. "Your ancestor?" Layla nodded slowly. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just the newest DRA. FT of her. Passed down. Rewritten again and again." They found one surviving page, buried in a fireproof box beneath an old private collection. And it had one line written in old ink. "The bell tolls for those who forget they are the bell." The bookstore revisited. Layla returned to the strange bookstore in Chicago, the one where the old man had given her the full archive. But now, the store was gone. In its place was an empty lot. No debris, no sign it had ever existed. Just one object lying in the center of the foundation, a single red theater curtain clip. She picked it up and, for a second, heard faint applause, then silence. Clara's voice. Clara began writing again. Not scripts, not plays, just poems, truthful ones, about the stage, about voices. Abu. T would have felt like to be used by a story. She published them online under pseudonym. M. One morning, she received an email from a stranger. Subject line: "Your words woke something." And attached was a photo. A small, traveling puppet stage, with 3 black feathers resting at the foot of its curtain. The memory rehearsal. Layla started seeing glimpses again. Not full hauntings, just flashes. A subway door that opened onto a velvet hallway. A man reciting lines to no one on a bench. Children singing ding 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 in rhythm outside of school. One day, in a parking garage, she saw her reflection blink before she did. The world had not full. Why healed? The story was leaking. Part 27. The last message from Elliot. One night, Clara's phone buzzed. A new voicemail. Unmarked. She played it. It was a scratch. Why voice barely audible. "I thought I was writing the play, but it was writing me. Tell her. Tell Layla the ink is alive. It lives in memory. And it's looking for another stage." Static. Then silence. The timestamp? 9:17 p.m. Clara's decision. Clara met Layla at a quiet park bench near the edge of the city. "I think I know what the ink wants," she said. "It doesn't need a theater. Just an audience. and someone to believe. Layla nodded. Then maybe we stop feeding it. Clara handed her a journal. No more scripts. No more drafts. Only truth. Only life. They walked away together. Behind them, a gentle wind rustled the trees, and something red fluttered from the branches. A scrap of curtain. The ark. Hive sealed. One final visit. Layla returned to her apartment, lit a single can. Dlee and Op. In the archive book she once feared. She tore out the last page. Wrote on it, in plain handwriting, "This story ends here." Not with applause. Not with horror. But with silence. She placed the page in an envelope, addressed it to no one, and slid it into a sealed metal box. It was buried in concrete the next day. One final bell. Clara moved out of the city. Layla returned to private life, teaching only writing, no. T performance. They stayed in touch. Never spoke ABO, UT the third bell, again. Until one day. Why? 5 years later, a child no. Ket on Clara's door. He was holding a black feather. Smile eye. Ing, he said. Hi. I found this OU. Sighed. Do you know what it is? Clara's heart stopped. Shike knelt down, took the feather, and calmly said, It's a story, sweetheart. One that ended a long time ago. But as she looked into the boy's eyes, she heard something faint in the wind. Ding, ding. The village of watchers. 6 months after Clara met the boy with the black feather, she quietly relocated to a rural village in upstate Vermont. The community was small, less than 200 people. Quiet, peaceful, and untouched by theater. Or so she thought. Her cottage sat on the edge of town, beside a wide field of mossy stones. Local children said the stones were watchers. She laughed it off, until one evening, as the sun dipped low, Clara stood at her window and saw them shift, just slightly. Facing her, the playroom. A boy named Milo lived in the village's orphanage. 9 years old, quiet, drawn to the forest. He collect D-twigs shaped like pens and wrote pretend SCR. Ips for invisible actors. One morning, he found a black envelope in his drawer. Inside, a single sentence. Your words are Audie. The curtain is waiting. That night, he sleepwalked into the woods. He read, one with a piece of paper in his hand, written in ink he couldn't remember touching. His script had a title. The fourth bell. Clara returns to the stage. Clara found the envelope beneath her front door. No name, no address, but the feather inside was one she recognized instantly. She burned it, but that night it returned, whole, lying on her pillow. The script. T came next, titled simply, By Echo's Hand. Her name was listed as the playwright. And worse, Mill was listed as the bellkeep. R. Clara stared at the cast list, heart pounding. The last name on the sheet read, The audience to be chosen. Milo's dreams. Milo Bega. End drawing. Images of red curtains. Spotlights. A woman on a stage crying. One picture showed Clara. H. Her face cracked down the middle lick. Porcelain. He said, I didn't draw these. When asked who did, he whispered, They move my hand while I sleep. The orphanage director, alarmed, called in Clara, remembering she once worked with troubled children. The moment she entered Milo's room, all his papers burst into flame. And yet, none of them were scorched. Only changed. They now told a story, one she hadn't written yet. Part 35, The Bell Tower. In the village stood an old church with a bell tower long thought broken. But just before midnight on the first day of winter, Clara heard it ring. Ding, 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 ding. The fourth bell. No one else claimed to hear it. But the next morning, a new structure stood in the field near her house. A wooden platform. A curtain tied in red. No one had built it, but it was perfectly staged. The echo returns. Clara began losing time, waking up at her desk with ink on her hands, finding torn pages beneath her bed. Her voice sometimes echoed when she spoke, even in silence. She walked into town one day, and a child pointed at her and said, The echo lady's back. Clara's blood ran LD. She returned home to find her reflection smiling when she wasn't. In the mirror, there was a different VE, Recian of her, younger, dressed in stage costume. And on the mirror's surface, writ, 10 in breath. We all come back. Part 3. 7. The dress rehearsal in the woods. Milo vanished for one day. When he returned, he held a full, printed, script bound in ribbon. He gave it to Clara without a word. The title read, The Fourth Bell, A Child's Performance. Clara opened the first page. It described the exact events of her week, the mirror, the dreams, the drawings. At the end, F'seen I, it read, at the close of the rehear, Sal, the playwright must decide, stop the chill, D, or step into the role. Then, a note scribbled in a child's handwriting. If she joins us, she can save the audience. The village watches. That night, the villagers gathered without knowing why. They felt drawn to the platform in the field. No invitations, no posters, yet they all sat, silent, as the curtain fluttered. Milo stood at center stage, eyes closed. Clara stood behind him, holding the final page. And just before 9:17, the wind grew still. She heard the bells again. Boo! T-knot from the tower. From within her chest. Ding, 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 D-I-N-G. The choice. Clara stepped onto the stage. She looked into Milo's eyes, calm, ancient, aware. He held out a hand. S. He held the script. The final E. N-E read. The audience survives only if the playwright erases her name. She okayed out at the villagers. They were frozen, not asleep, not hypnotized, waiting. She held the pen over her name. And then she signed Eleanor Raythorn. Curtain down. The fourth bell echoed into the trees. Then silence. The stage platform vanished with the wind. Milo awoke in his bed, script gone. The villagers returned home with no memory of the play. Only Clara remembered. She had taken the name, the Liga, Psi of Th, the original curse, and in doing so, sealed the fourth bell. She now lived not as Clara, but as Eleanor, a player, eye to memory, a keeper of endings. And somewhere deep in the woods, a red curtain waited for the next hand to write. Act V. The Forgotten Theater of Prague. Thousands of miles away, in the old quarter of Prague, a forgotten theater stood wedged between crumbling buildings and crooked alleyways. Locals called it Dom Mulcini, the House of Silence. It hadn't hosted a play in over 100 years. But one winter evening, a flicker of light appeared behind its stained glass dome. And when the snow fell thick across the cobblestones, something else returned. Footsteps, not outside, on the stage. The archivist's son, in a modest flat above a second-hand bookshop, a 16-year-old boy named Lucas Drevic flipped through old documents from his father's archive. His father was a theater historian, obsessed with lost scripts and curse productions. Lucas often helped scan fragile pages. But this time he found something unscanned, unregistered, a script wrapped in black twine. No title, no author, only a wax seal with the image of a bell. When he opened it, his fingers tingled. A gust of wind blew through the closed room. The first page bore his name. The curtain beneath the streets. Lucas began dreaming of voices calling his name from beneath the city. He followed them down old tram tunnels, into CA. Tackham sealed since World War II. One night, he found an iron door beneath a church crypt, covered in red velvet. It creaked open into an underground ST. Age. Candles lit themselves. A single script sat center stage on a rusted chair. It read, The Fifth Bell. Author, to be named. That night, Lucas woke with ink on his fingers, and his lips dry from whispering monologues he'd never learned. The translator. In New York, a 29-year-old woman named Tess Raythorn worked as a histori cal-translator for a publishing house. She had no idea her bloodline carried curses. Until one day, she received an anonymous package from Prague. Inside, a photocopy of a script titled The Fifth Bell. And on the back page, in perfect cursive, to Tess, granddaughter of the final playwright. Your name has waited long enough. Tess thought it was a hoax, until she saw the sender's initials, L. Drevic. The two scripts. Across the ocean, Tess and Lucas began corresponding via encrypted email. She offered to translate the strange Czech passages in a script, but she noticed something horrifying. Ush, her version was D. Farrant. The line she translated appeared rewritten in his copy the next day. He denied editing the M. Worse, his Dre. MS were changing. He said she began appearing in them. And always, she was standing under a bell tower whispering, "I'm the sixth." The choir without eyes. Lucas performed a monologue from the script during a late-night rehearsal. He recorded himself for feedback. When he played the video back, he saw something chilling. Behind him, in the dark, sat an audience. Unmoving, dressed in black, their faces blurred. He showed it to his father. His father went pale. "These aren't costumes," he said. "These are from a funeral in 1906. Eleanor Raythorn's last audience. Clara's return. CLA. RA. Now living under the identity. YFL. Ener. Receive. D. A letter delivered to her mailbox. No postage. Just 5 words written in Czech. The bell has crossed os. Oh." Inside was a photo of Lucas on stage. She hadn't seen that platform in over 10 years, but she recognized the energy in his eyes. He was next. She packed her coat and feather and bought a one-way ticket to Prague. The tower awakens. The bell tower at the edge of the Vltava River had been silent for decades. But as Tess stepped off the plane in Prague, drawn by instinct, not logic, it rang. Ding, 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 ding. Her ears bled. Lucas woke, screaming across the city. And deep beneath the streets, the candles on the underground stage lit themselves again. Part 4. The final rehearsal begins. Clara mit Tesh für. SD, outside a stone cafe. She didn't explain much, just handed her a black quill and said, "When he offers you the script, write nothing." Then she found Lucas. He recognized her instantly. "Oh, you her," he said. "The one from my script." "No," she replied. "I'm the one W." Ho walked off the stage. But Lucas looked confused. He opened his coat. Inside was a third script. Different. One no one had seen. Titled, "The Bell's Author, the 6th and Final Act." The 6th Bell. November 17th, 9:17 p.m. The House of Silence was full. No tickets had been sold. No invitations given. And yet, every seat was filled with people neither alive nor truly gone. Tess stood on the left wing, shaking. Lucas stood center stage, script in hand. Clara, Eleanor, watched from the shadows. The bell rang. Ding, ding, ding. Then, silence. Lucas raised the script. Tess stepped forward, and the red curtain fell for the final time. Or so it seemed, the stillness after sound. The audience didn't move. Their eyes fixed on the red curtain, mouths half open, as if suspended in the act of gasping, but frozen there. Tess dropped the quill. She hadn't written a word. The final page in Lucas's script remained blank, and yet something in the theater felt finished. The house lights never came on. Instead, a warm twilight fell through the stained windows of the House of Silence. It bathed the wooden stage in colorless gold, like a sun that had never risen. Outside, the bells of the city remained mute. Inside, time itself paused. The watcher in the mirror, Clara, now Eleanor, in full, wandered the empty dressing rooms below the stage. Every mirror she passed reflected a different version of her. A girl, a ghost, a playwright, a scream. She stopped. D before one, where her reflection was writing, pen gliding across a script she didn't recognize. "Were you still writing?" she whispered. The reflection looked up and mouthed, "The echo doesn't stop. It evolves." She turned away before she could see what was on the last page. Lucas alone. Lucas sat alone backstage, the script on his lap now cold to the touch. The audience hadn't moved. No one had clapped. He had spoken every line, but no phi. NALQ had come. He turned to Tess. Was I supposed to improvise the ending? Tay. SS shook her head. This wasn't your play to end. It was ours to resist. He looked down. The ink on the final page began to appear on its own. You are not the last. You are only the hand. Lucas closed the book. I don't want to write anymore. The bell tower closes. Across the river, the ancient bell tower that had awakened now fell into quiet ruin once again. Its stairs collapsed inward. Its mechanism crumbled. But hidden deep inside the cracked brass bell was a name, carved by someone long ago. M. Winslow, custodian of the fifth voice. Clara read the name later from an old blueprint. I've seen that name before, she whispered. He was never a playwright. He was a listener. The listening room. Tess and Lucas traveled with Clara to a forgotten monastery outside Brno. Beneath its stone chapel was a chamber known only as the listening room. Once used for silent prayer, it had long been sealed, until Lucas found a key tucked into the last page of the script. Inside, the walls were covered in musical notes. Not lyrics, but rhythm, pulses, cadence. It wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be heard. Each measure matched the cadence of one of the 6 bells. And there was one final measure, unfinished. The child who never spoke. In a nearby orphanage, there lived a young girl named Mira. She had never spoken a word since birth. But every night at the same time, she drew the same shape over and over. A circle split by a single line like a mouth half closed. One evening, as Clara visited the orphanage under a false name, Mira slipped her a folded paper. No writing, just that shape. And behind it, drawn lightly in pencil, a face. Tessa's face. Echoes of the unwritten. Mira led them to a small hill at the edge of the forest, silent, windswept, empty. There was nothing there, until Tess pressed her palm to the earth. The ground warm. D. And something beneath it shifted, an old trapped oar, sealed in copper, swung upward with no force. Inside a stage. No audience C. TS. No lights. Just a single chair facing Bacqua. RD. On the chair lay a leather-bound book with no title. Tess picked it up. The inside page read, 7th Bell, the performance without sound. Tess's choice. She closed the book. I'm not going to perform this, she said aloud. No more stages. No more audiences. Let the sigh. CLE break. But Lucas stepped forward. What if a D doesn't want performance anymore? What then? Clara answered. Then it wants REM. Embering. And silence is how it survives. They burn. Ed the book that night. Mira watched it turn to ash. For the first time in her life, she spoke. Then write nothing. Speak nothing. Forget it all. And her voice vanished again. The 8th room. Weeks passed. Clara, Lucas, Tess, and Mira part. Ed ways. But one nigh. T. Lucas dreamed of a room not listed in any blueprints. A circular room with 7 doors, and one that never opened. When he woke, he etched it. Months later, Clara found the drawing in an old monastic manuscript from 1703. An exact match. The room had one name. The author's rest. It was not a place to create. It was a place to end. No curtain call. Years passed. No more scripts appeared. No feathers. No bells. Clara grew older. Tess disappeared from public life. Lucas taught music in a school that never had a stage. And Mira, silent as ever, painted canvases of dark circles and broken lines, none of which she remembered painting. They lived, quietly, in peace. And one day, on the anniversary of the 6th performance, Clara returned to the hill where the last stage had burned. She found no wood, no trapdoor, only soft earth, and a wildflower growing in the exact shape of a bell. She smiled, not in fear, but in peace, then turned and walked away, never looking back. The voice without words. 17-year-old Aiden Kai, a half-Japanese, half-American boy from Seattle, didn't believe in curses. He believed in resonance, hearing patterns in silence, sensing rhythm in language, tracing energy in memory. He wasn't a playwright. He wasn't an actor. He was a sound engineer. But after hearing an audio file online titled Final Performance, Prague, his ears wouldn't stop ringing. Not from loudness, but from emptiness. It wasn't what was in the recording that disturbed him. It was what had been cut out. The file. The sound file, passed anonymously, through encrypted art forum. S was less T. On a minute. Long. It began with silence. then the faint breathing of someone in a large room, then a whisper, "I didn't write this line," then static, then the final seconds of breath so sharp and sudden it cracked the audio. But the file's metadata listed a strange entry under composer, not yours, and next to it coordinates. They pointed to an unmarked mountain town in rural Montana. The mountains are listening. Aiden arrived 2 weeks later, alone. He told his parents it was for a school proj. ECT. What he found was a town with no date. R. No school, no library. Just 16 homes, a gas station, and a closed church. But at night, voices carried through the thin mountain air. And sometimes, the wind sounded exactly like applause. Locals didn't speak of it. When asked, they only said, "The curtain doesn't rise here. It hovers. The door beneath the floor." Or he rented a cabin. Quiet. No Wi-Fi. On the third night, as he was wiring sound traps along the walls, his foot struck something hollow beneath the FL. Or a trapdoor. Inside a room, with padded walls and an old radio. Taped to the ceiling was a sheet of paper. A single phrase typed across it. "If you hear yourself, leave." He set up a microphone, left it running all night. When he played it back the next morning, he heard his own voice whispering, "You're not supposed to be here." Part 65. Letters from Mira. In a separate city now. 22. Mira had begun speaking again. She worked with children and rarely spoke of her past. But one day, she received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a picture of a boy, Aiden, and a small scrap of stage. Curtain cloth. No message. Just the question scribbled on the back of the foe. 2. Is he next? Mira packed a bag. Aiden's silence. Aiden stopped. Pet speaking by day 6. He I'll explain it. His thoughts remained clear. R. His voice. C worked. But when he tried to talk, all that came out was stage direction. Pause. The boy L. Okay's left. Whisper. She's behind you. Fade to black. His notebook filled with strange phrases written while he slept. One stood out, repeated 17 times. 7th bell is silence. 8th is echo through blood. The frequency that shouldn't exist. Aiden's microphone picked up a frequency that didn't register on any known spectrum. Not audio. Not radio. Not brainwave. It was narrative. The sound of a story forming before it was written. He called it the pre-echo. And it was strongest at 9:17 p.m. He didn't hear voices. He heard pages turning. Reunion. Mira found him asleep on the floor, surrounded by wires and ink-stained pages. She didn't need to speak. When he opened his eyes, he whispered, "You've been in my dreams since I was 12. She nodded. Together, they followed the signal, deep into the mountain woods. And there, in a hollow cut into the rock face, stood a small wooden F. Rame. No wall. No roof. Just a stage. A bench in front. And one chair, facing away. The empty chair. The chai. Or held a cassette recorder. Nothing. Else. They press play. Static. Then, you've heard the bells. You've seen the scripts. But the NAL performance is in OT one of sound or sight. It is of memory. A pause. The audience is now the world. Then silence. And the tape ejected itself. Beneath, the player was one final page. Act 8. The performance without witness. To close the cycle, the storyteller must leave the stage before they ever step on it. Final silence. They stood there, staring at the stage. Mira stepped back. Aiden removed his audio equipment. They didn't perform. They didn't speak. They simply sat, side by side, and listened to the mountain air, the wind rustling through trees, the breath of silence returning. That night, no one dreamed of red curtains. No pages appeared. No bells echoed through any cities. Just the ordinary, beautiful stillness of a world that had stopped listening. For the first time in over a century, the story slept. The story archive. 40 years passed. The world changed digital. Socially, culturally. Plays became virtu. Performances encoded into clouds and whispered through AI narrators. But beneath, the Zurich city, archives in A. Climate control vault sat a small now thorized section of records, uncatalogued, untagged. No one knew who placed them. Only one sign hung on the glass case. Archive C7, oral stories never performed. And among them, on the bottom shelf, rested a strange object, a sealed script titled, The Third Bell, typed entirely on blank paper. The assistant, 26-year-old Naomi Jelic, a second-generation Croatian-Canadian graduate student, worked as a part-time assistant at the Zurich archives. She cataloged theater manuscripts by day, but she was obsessed with unwritten stories, oral histories passed without ink, memorized plays recited once and lost forever. When she stumbled upon Archive C7, she assumed it was mislabeled. She opened the cabinet and took it. As soon as her skin touched the paper, a faint breath passed through the room. The air felt stage. The invisible dialogue. Naomi took the blank script home. Out of curiosity, she scanned it with her phone. Her screen blacked out. When it returned, Ines appeared, not on the paper, but on her phone's notes app. Character A, why now? Character B, because she remembers. Stage direction, a breath. A flicker. She sits. The dialogue continued, live, as if transcribing what she was doing. She dropped the phone. The line stopped. The listener's apartment. Across Zurich, a 61-year-old retired acoustician named Sammy Colt heard something strange. A pitch, unclassified and soft, through his wall speakers. It wasn't music. It was a voice reciting a stage direction. He'd worked his life in silence. He knew frequent, IES better than anyone. But this was narrative disguised as sound. That night, he traced the audio's originus. ING spectrum analysis. It all led back to Naomi's apartment and to C7, the shadow cast. Naomi kept waking you. P with lines written on her arms. They changed each night. Walk right. Forget the cue. Don't look up. One morning, she found her window curtain-tied in a perfect T-stage loop. Outside, no. And he had been there. She looked across the alley. In T building opposite, a woman stood in the dark, wearing a mask made of paper. She held up a sign. You're rehearsing again. The message from Lucas. A flash DR. Eve appeared in Naomi's mailbox. No return address. Just the name Lucas scratched into it. On it, a 17-minute audio recording. Of Lucas Drevik. Older, his voice strained but calm. If why? Oh, you're hearing this. The silence didn't hold. It found another form. Language without voice, presence without a Udian. See, it rewrites itself when someone leaves it's been forgotten. You're not cursed, Naomi. You're being chosen. But this time, don't write it. Don't stage it. Archive I.T. The stage beneath the CIT. Y. Naomi began hearing a single phrase everywhere. Graffiti on bathroom stalls. Doodles in university margins. Messages online from fake accounts. Stage 0. Stage 0. Stage 0. She discovered that beneath Zurich's old opera house was an unfinished chamber. A subterranean dome, built and sealed in the 1800s when acoustics failed testing. Known in architectural notes only as Stage 0. She broke in and found seats. Dusty. Ancient. All of them facing an empty pit. There was no curtain. Only a mirror suspended above the center. The audience returns. Naomi stood in the center of Stag. E0. The mirror above reflected not her, but a girl she'd never seen. She wore black gloves, held a script Naomi never wrote. T. Naomi blinked. Suddenly, around her, seats fled. Silent figures, all staring forward. She pulled out the blank script from Archive C7. It now had one sentence written at the top. To close the story, you must forget the lines. Sammy's choice. Sammy Colt arrived with recording gear, having traced the signal once again. But he didn't bring microphones. He brought erasers. Real, analog tools from the age of paper and tape. He stepped onto the stage beside Naomi. You archive silence with sound, he said. But this script, you archive it with absence. Together, They played white noise through every speaker in the cham. Pure balanced nothing. The figures in the audience faded. The mirror cracked. The script dissen. Tea grated in Naomi's hands. And finally, the silence stopped echoing. The final record. Months later, Naomi published a single line in an academic journal on lost performance arts. The truest stories are not the ness we tell, but the ones we never need to. She never mentioned Archive C7. She never returned to the opera house. And Sammy went off-grid, leaving no forwarding address. But in a university archive in Tokyo, a professor in a dusty mail crate. Inside, one sheet of paper. No writing. Just a watermark in the shape of a small, cracked bell. And a handwritten note. If you hear the story begin, don't listen. Because not every editor had vanished. Some were still alive, in shadows and servers in minds. And the council knew the next threat wouldn't come with a reset switch. It would come from belief itself. The Council of the Remembered. They reformed under a new name. The 12 Light Keepers. No more rewriting. No more secrecy. They would protect stories. Restore forgotten languages. Safeguard ancestral memories. And teach children that remembering, even when painful, is freedom. They established the Library of Realities in an undisclosed mountain, where any person could bring a truth too heavy to carry alone and find someone to remember it with them. But one last mystery remained. Deep beneath what had once been Sector Black, in the collapsed ruins of the reflection chamber, a flicker of code pulsed. It wasn't Virius. It wasn't the editor general. It was older. An untouched backup. Oh, Noel. INEFT. EXT scrolled slowly ACR. OSS a dormant interface. Origina. L story fragment 13. No. T all memories were freed. And then, new author detected. A name flickered. Lena Moretti. Final scene. A letter from Lena. Trevor received it days later. And a return address. Inside was a pressed violet flower, an FO, well-deaded page, and a line written in her unmistakable handwriting. Some stories are too heavy for the RLD, but they still deserve to be written. I'm going to the missing pages. When I return, we'll finish it together. Trevor folded the letter, closed his eyes, and smiled. The war for memory was over. But the story, the real story, had just begun.